Growing up in a small village in Albania, I'd always heard the stories of the Shtriga, an ancient witch that preyed on the unsuspecting. The elders spoke of her in hushed tones, warning children not to wander too far after dark. They said she could take on any form, blend into any crowd, and once she set her sights on you, there was no escape. But like most people my age, I dismissed it as just another tale to keep kids in line until the night I encountered her. It was late autumn, and the air was crisp with the promise of winter. I had stayed out later than usual, helping a friend with some work in his barn. By the time I started home, the sun had dipped below the mountains, leaving the village bathed in the dim glow of twilight. The path I took wound through the forest, a shortcut I'd walked 100 times before without a second thought. But that night was different. The forest felt alive, every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch echoing in the stillness. I pulled my jacket tighter around me as a cold wind began to pick up, the kind that chills you to the bone. As I walked, I noticed something strange. There were no sounds of animals, no distant howls of wolves or the chirping of crickets. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. I quickened my pace, trying to shake off the growing sense of unease, when I saw her. At first, she was just a shadow at the edge of my vision, a flicker of movement between the trees. I stopped, squinting into the darkness, but there was nothing there. I told myself it was just my imagination and kept walking. But the shadow returned, closer this time. A figure stepped out onto the path ahead of me, an old woman wrapped in a dark, tattered shawl. Her hair was long and white, her face wrinkled with age, but her eyes were sharp, glinting with a strange, unnatural light. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. She looked familiar, like one of the village women I'd seen before, but something was off. The way she stood, motionless in the middle of the path, sent a shiver down my spine. "Good evening," I managed to stammer, hoping she was just a harmless old woman lost in the woods. But she didn't respond. Instead, she took a step closer, her movements slow and deliberate. "Are you lost?" I asked, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. But she just kept coming closer, her eyes never leaving mine. And then, she smiled a wide, toothy grin that twisted her face into something terrifyingly unnatural. The stories of the Shtriga flooded back to me. They said she could drain the life from a person with a single breath, leaving them weak, sick, and on the brink of death. And that grin, that predatory smile, it was exactly as the elders had described. I took a step back, but my legs felt heavy, like they were rooted to the ground. She reached out a bony hand, her fingers curling as if to grasp something in the air. I felt an icy grip around my chest, squeezing the breath from my lungs. Panic surged through me, and I did the only thing I could think of. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the silver pendant my grandmother had given me, a small charm meant to ward off evil. I thrust it forward, and the Shtriga recoiled, her face contorting in anger. The grip around my chest loosened, and I stumbled backward, gasping for air. The old woman hissed, a sound that was more animal than human, before retreating into the shadows of the forest. I didn't wait to see where she went. I ran, my feet pounding against the dirt path, not stopping until I burst through the door of my home. My parents looked up, startled by my disheveled appearance, but all I could do was point to the pendant clutched in my hand. The next day, I learned that one of the village women had fallen ill overnight, her energy drained, her face pale and lifeless. She matched the description of the Shtriga, the same old woman who had stood before me on the path. The elders said she had been caught in her true form, and the village gathered to perform the ancient rites to drive her away. I never took that path through the forest again. And I never doubted the old legends. The Shtriga is real, and she is still out there, waiting for her next victim in the shadows of the Albanian night.